Dear students, let us start the discussion on Saturday, 27th August 2016 newspaper. Now, I was feeling severe sore throat and I'm suffering from it, so I was unable to upload the video on time since 2 days. Now, I'm going to recoup back and do that. The first article is related to surrogacy. Now, in India, the commercial surrogacy is banned because from 2002, when it was allowed in India, so India is one way said to have become the capital of the surrogacy of the world. So in this scenario, an altruistic surrogacy is allowed according to the new bill being introduced by the government and not the commercial surrogacy. An altruistic surrogacy is one where no money transaction has to happen. Now, another to this, if surrogacy has to be undertaken, it has to happen within the relatives and known members of the family, not from the outsiders. Added to that, the surrogacy will not be allowed for any foreigners and it will be only limited to the childless couple who are married for at least 5 years. It will not be allowed for the couple who has biological children or adopted children. Along with this, the single parents, homosexuals, and live-in relationships, they cannot apply for the surrogacy. So these are the various steps which are taken up by the government. Now if you see altruistic surrogacy, to what extent it can be implemented by the government in India? If you talk about PC and PNDT Act, the major failure of the government is implementation of the law, which is worsening the sex ratio even today. So if we take the same scenario, the surrogacy law is also going to be a failure in its implementation. Now coming to the R.K. Raghavan's article, it is in the context of Mr. H.C. Gupta, the coal secretary, who was getting prosecuted by the CBI for investigation in coal block scam. Now in this scenario, let us see something about Prevention of Corruption Act, section 13(1)(d) subclause 3. What this law says is, any of the action taken by a civil servant, if it is causing pecuniary benefit to any private individual, then it can be considered as a corruption. So it's like this. Now, for example, if I, as a civil servant, I want to go and recover the money, and the person is said he is going to pay 1 crore in the place of 2 crores. So I think that probably at least I get the 1 crore for the government if I recover that money. So it means that the CBI can interpret it as a loss of 1 crore revenue to the government, which is a pecuniary benefit to private individual. This is one of the reasons for growing NPAs of the banks. None of the bank managers are ready to recollect the money which is below the norm or below the recovery levels. The reason is, with good intentions, if they go and tomorrow the CBI can indict them saying they caused loss to the bank. So for example, Vijay Mallya case. Now, if the banks do not respond to his offers or else some 6,000 to 7,000 crores they can gain today, so they can look after the remaining money later. But if today banks sit tight onto this issue, the NPAs are going to increase and even their interest is not going to be recovered. So if any enthusiastic bank manager tries to recover that, he may face the challenge tomorrow. And second thing, out of neglect or else out of overlooking, some people may ignore the fine details. So in this scenario also they can be indicted. So why this provision was introduced in 1988 Act? So before this, there is something called abuse of office. The abuse of office was not clearly defined. So 1988, they want to be clear what means the abuse of office. It is majorly indicted again as the people, the honest officials can be subservient to the ministers. So in those circumstances, they can take the actions in line with the ministers. So finally, they will also get escaped if no such a provision exists. Because of this, to plug in this loophole, this thing has been brought in. But however, it is killing the motivation of the honest officers to make the rightful decisions, because best intended decisions, if they go wrong, they can be considered as corruption under the Prevention of Corruption Act. So the H.C. Gupta case is no way different from this. Now, if this law is amended, how a honest civil servant shall stand against the minister. So what the fear can be instilled in the honest civil servant being subservient to the minister is the question. At the same time, this provision, if it has continued, it is going to demoralize the civil servants for making decisions. So this is what is the catch. Now coming to Modi's Baloch policy. Now, from the ramparts of Red Fort, Prime Minister Modi has raised the Baluchistan issue and the human rights violations over there. How India shall take it forward. Now, the Pakistan, is it going to link the Kashmir issue to the Baloch issue? Now, already the Pakistan Prime Minister, Mr. Sharif, he has dispatched 20 plus ambassadors to expose the human rights violations in Kashmir. Is that going to draw parallel between India and Pakistan, Indian Kashmir and the Pakistani Baluchistan? The reason is India's human rights track record is very far better compared to Baluchistan, where the state has used its air force against its own citizens. If a parallel is being drawn, it will be in a long-term disadvantage towards India. India expects that by raising the Baluchistan issue, it can control the Pakistani tantrums. But to what extent it is possible? And second is, the China is also being brought up into this, China and Iran, because they have the stakes for having a stable state structure in Baluchistan. The China's One Belt One Road initiative and also Iran connectivity with the other countries. Everything needs a stable Baluchistan structure. So it may irritate the other countries too. That's what the second article says. The China is very worried when Prime Minister raised the issue of Baluchistan and human rights violations over there. And added to that, as from the Afghanistan, the America is moving out. So the stable state structure is need to be created. The China has greater stakes in this. So in this scenario, China is building an anti-terror structure. A quadrilateral group is being created for this with Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan and China. That's what this article talks about. Now coming to the article 14, 15 and 25. If you see clearly, article 14 and 15 talks about right to equality and 25 right to freedom of religion. So temple entry movement or masjid entry movement for women, so it is to question the restrictions imposed on to them, and they call it as violation of article 14, 15, 25. So the happy to bleed movement, it is about allowing the woman into the temples during the menstruation period where generally the restrictions exist. So these articles are upheld, or else the temple entry of the woman and masjid entry of the woman is upheld by the Bombay High Court, quoting the article 14, 15, 25. So in the famous Haji Ali sanctum, now the woman can enter and give the prayers. Now coming to health care. Now there are two types. One is preventive health care and curative health care. Now if universal health care has to be achieved, the costs have to be decreased in this. The government has to focus on the preventive health care. But if you see, India total health care, that is the private health care and public health care, they together spend around 9.6% of the total expenditure on preventive health care. 9.6% is too low. Now again, private healthcare is never interested in preventive healthcare. It is the government that has to spend on. But government, through insurance-based healthcare delivery systems, it is neglecting the preventive healthcare. Coming to total healthcare expenditure, it is 1% of the total GDP. And what is the public expenditure in the total expenditure? It is around 29% of the total healthcare expenditure is from the public healthcare expenditure. So in these circumstances, as governmental expenditure decreases, the stress on the preventive will decrease and the stress on curative is going to increase. It is going to increase the cost of healthcare delivery in India, and it is going to make the situation much worse, and out of the pocket expenditure is bound to increase in India. And coming to Syrian issue, you know that the Kurds, they are a formidable force against the Islamic State. Now the Kurd fighters, they are being provided the air cover by United States of America. Now here, the Turkey, Syria, Iraq, They are all against to the Kurds. The reason being, there is a separate demand for Kurdistan on all the overlapping areas from these three countries. The Turkey goes to the extent of considering or labeling them as the terrorists. And on the other side, you have ISIS. And then the rebel forces, the rebels who are opposing the Assad, and then government forces. This Assad is being supported by Russia and Iran. The rebels are being supported by the Middle East, Gulf, these monarchs, especially Saudi Arabia, UAE, and added to that United States. All these are providing the support to the rebels. Now, this is what the situation where multiple forces, they are creating a civil war environment. Now, if a country has to develop, it has to emphasize on two capitals, that is human capital and social capital. The Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore, he says that India has underinvested in human capital and social capital. Now coming to the labor SOPs initiated by the government. If you carefully observe, 2004, January 1st onwards, we got the new pension scheme. So under the new pension scheme, the employee has to contribute for his retirement benefits and the matching contribution will be made by the government and employer. So under this new pension scheme, now the government has provided a universal gratuity, the death or else other gratuities to the people who are covered under NPS too. That is, the government employees who are covered under the NPS, they also get the gratuity. And the next is coming to the other labor SOPs. The minimum wage is going to be increased to 10,500 rupees. Anganwadi workers also are going to get a pension of 2,000 rupees, a minimum pension of 2,000 rupees. So these are the changes considered by the government. Thank you very much.